Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Austin Petersen here. Today is Monday, June the 12th, and today we're going to be talking about a story that broke last week, some confirmation hearings presided over by Senator Bernie Sanders, where Mr. Sanders applied a religious test to someone, and I thought it was an interesting story, especially because, as you all know, I'm a big proponent of religious liberty. Very important topic in today's modern age, where it seems like religious liberty is under attack no matter what your beliefs or non-beliefs are. And I stumbled across a story from actually a good friend of mine, a woman by the name of Sarah Squire, who wrote about this story. And her article was published at the Foundation for Economic Education, or fee.org. Sarah writes the headline, "Bernie Sanders is asking the wrong question about religious liberty." And I'm going to skip the first paragraph on this and get right to the meat of this because I'm actually in a little bit of a hurry this morning. There's a lot of exciting things happening here in Kansas City. I'm actually not going to be working from home anymore. You will be getting your Freedom Report podcasts, but I'm just going to have to record them for you earlier in the morning because I'm moving into some office space today. Moving on up. Yep, things are getting exciting around here. We've got all kinds of things going on. I'll send some pictures of our new office space. We've got some staffers coming in today as well. We had 3 new people move in as well, and of course some of you may know about Mr. Jeffrey Carson, and yeah, we're getting pretty excited about all the happenings and goings on around here. But let me get to the story so that I can I'll just tease you out a little bit. I'll tell you a little bit more about it after the show. Sarah Squire writes, during confirmation hearings for Russell Vought, Trump's nominee for Deputy Director of the Office of Management and Budget, Senator Bernie Sanders grilled Vought about an article he wrote about a faculty firing at Wheaton College. In the article, Vought discussed a range of doctrinal issues, including the theological status of non-Christians. Sanders used the article in the hearing as a way of publicly inquiring into Vaught's religious beliefs and claiming that those beliefs make him unfit for office. Sarah says, "I want to avoid getting into the weeds of the theology behind Vaught's article. There's a good discussion at The Atlantic for those that are interested. But what interests Squire instead is the way that Sanders' public questioning of the religious beliefs of the candidate for office serve as a reminder of some of the worst aspects of 17th century religious politics. The early modern era was famously marked by violence among religious groups. Catholics, Protestants, Jews, and Muslims were all exiled, tortured, imprisoned, and killed at various times and in various countries, depending on who was in the throne. After the end of the 30 Years' War and the English Civil War, much of the bloodshed ceased, but while religious conflicts became less bloody, they did not disappear. Beginning in the mid-17th century and lasting until 1829, a series of acts passed by the English Parliament required the swearing of oaths of religious orthodoxy and attendance at and performance of orthodox religious rituals if one wanted to hold public office or graduate from Oxford or Cambridge. Now, what is toleration? We should all be familiar with John Locke's letter concerning toleration, which argues against these acts and against similar laws constraining religious belief. Many of these acts were specifically written in order to keep Catholics from holding public office, as there were fears about the potentially divided loyalties of those who served both the English king and the Pope. These acts effectively kept out members of non-Orthodox Protestant sects as well. And I'm just going to take a little break in here because Sarah Squire doesn't mention it. But in the United States, we actually had a problem with that as well because right before the election of John F. Kennedy, many of the Protestants in this country were fearful that because we had never had a Catholic president before, they were fearful about the Vatican's influence, potential influence over the White House. Some people even accused John F. Kennedy of wanting to have the Pope govern in his stead. And so we have had some history of religious persecution here in the United States as well. And certainly the modern iteration of it, are we seeing for example, the story about Christian bakers who are being forced to bake wedding cakes. So there has been some religious persecution here in the United States, but thankfully we have overcome that in many ways. These acts kept Jews from holding public office at the time. So while it was, of course, distressing this week to see it suggested that someone's religious beliefs could and should render him unfit for office, it was particularly disturbing to see Bernie Sanders, who is Jewish, making that suggestion after Jews had been kept from office for so long by similar methods. Vaught's beliefs about whether Muslims are saved or not have no bearing on his ability to serve in the Office of Management and Budget and create a 21st century test act that requires inquiry into such beliefs is a very bad idea. It would be a similarly bad idea for Vaught or Pence or any other believing Christian to suggest that a Jewish nominee should be kept from office because he believes that Christians are wrong and that the Messiah has not yet arrived. Nearly any religion contains within it doctrines and beliefs that exclude or set apart those who do not accept those doctrines and beliefs. That's very true. Because I live, this is Sarah Squire speaking, I live in the complex religious environment of America, I work every day with people who believe I am unsaved and possibly unsavable. They work with me, and I probably find some of their doctrines wrong-headed or worse, but we can still do our jobs. And we can do that because our work community does not have to replicate our faith community. I care at the office about how well our mutual work gets done. I care at my house of worship about how well our mutual prayers are said. There is a division there that allows our work to get done well and our prayers to be said properly without requiring any of us to commit what we consider to be sins. What Bernie Sanders asked Mr. Vaught was a theological question. It amounted to asking, do you think that non-Christians are saved? What Bernie Sanders should have asked Mr. Vaught was a civil society question, and this is the meat of this. He should have asked, quote, do your religious beliefs require that you treat non-Christians as lesser people with fewer rights than Christians? Sarah writes, I'm fairly certain that most Christians wouldn't give an unqualified yes in response to the first question, but I'm completely certain that it's the answer to the second question that actually matters. And that's really the heart of this discussion. Because if you're asking someone if they believe that non-Christians are saved, well, of course, they're perfectly willing, they're perfectly within their rights to believe that. If you're a Christian and you believe that people who are not Christians are not going to be saved in the afterlife, well, that's part of your theological belief, and you have every right to believe that. But if you believe that people in your work life should be excluded or they should be discriminated against, especially if it's a government job, then yes, that is the type of question that it should exclude someone from public service. And, it became a big issue in my presidential campaign last year, the question of religious liberty in regards to whether or not Christians should be forced to bake wedding cakes for gay weddings. So I do think that there is a problem nowadays with discrimination against Christians, and it's really difficult to make that because, of course, they are in the majority right now. The Christians have the majority, but there is a sort of a backlash against the Christian community for what are perceived wrongs against them from perhaps the LGBT community, and we've seen lots of discussions recently about some discrimination that's happened, for example, at the LGBT Pride Parade, where they were pushing back against Trump supporters or who were homosexuals, and they were pushing back against Pink Pistols, which is a group of Second Amendment, like gun-toting gays, right? So if you know me, I'm actually wearing my shirt right now. It says, I want to live in a world where gay married couples can protect their marijuana plants with fully automatic machine guns. And that is the world that I want to live in, because that's a world of toleration. And to me, I think that Bernie Sanders has made a mistake that Sarah Squire has correctly pointed out, that the difference between someone's religion and their public life, and in terms of what they can do in terms of service or their job or their career, these are two separate things. Now, the waters get a little bit muddied when you're talking about having a private business versus working for the government, because if you're a Christian-owned business, then someone can say, well, Austin, couldn't you apply this test to what Mr. Vaught is going to do in government and to someone's private business? No. And the reason why is because having a job at the Office for the Management of Budget is a completely different thing from working at a flower shop or working selling cakes. Because if you own a private business, that's private. And we always want to try and keep private and public separate, right? Just like we want to keep church and state. We want to keep church and state separate because we think that church and state will do better the more that they are separate. Because I come from that very Jeffersonian school of thinking that and the separation of church and state is actually not a part of the Constitution, and many people will remind us of that. It was actually a letter that Thomas Jefferson wrote to the Danbury Baptists, because the Danbury Baptists at the time were actually very nervous about the creation of the new government. Thomas Jefferson had to write a letter to the Danbury Baptists as a way to calm them down, because the Danbury Baptists were concerned that there would be some form of an establishment of an official religion in the United States. And of course, when we saw the Bill of Rights come out and the Constitution came out, it was quickly ratified, I think, in part because of Thomas Jefferson's assurances to the Danbury Baptists that there would be a separation of church and state, and the First Amendment clearly stated that there would be no establishment of religion. So Sarah Squire's question here, I think, is the question that Bernie Sanders should have asked, right? If she really wanted to put Vaught on the spot and determine if he was some sort of a theological madman, right? If he wanted to create some kind of a theocracy in the United States, which I have a hard time believing that someone who's going to run the Office of the Management of Budget is going to somehow establish a Christian theocracy. You know, perhaps if he was running some other government agency where perhaps he had more power, then I think, you know, you might have some concerns. But I hardly think that this is the type of role where even the most radical of his theological beliefs would necessarily have an impact on our daily life. Yeah, the question that he should have asked: do your religious beliefs require that you treat non-Christians as lesser people with fewer rights than Christians? That was the real question. But Bernie Sanders seemed to go on some kind of weird tirade or rant. And as we all know, I mean, Bernie Sanders is Jewish, but he doesn't seem to be a practicing Jew. And so it is rather ironic that someone who has his own people have been historically persecuted would appear now to be the persecutor, right? And, you know, it just makes me upset because no one is asking the right question. Sarah Squire has nailed it. Why don't we have more libertarians in government? Sarah Squire should have been the U.S. senator that was asking these questions, because maybe if we had more libertarians in office, then perhaps we would have better questions being asked of our elected representatives, which is actually very ironic because there's something that's related to something similar, a project that I'm working on today. Your boy AP is moving into some office space today with his friends, and I could not be more excited. If you all don't know, we actually have a group called the Freedom Ninja Army, Austin Petersen's Freedom Ninja Army, and you'll probably see some of the posts in there. If you haven't joined our activist group, then I highly suggest you do so now, because there's a lot of exciting things coming on the horizon. And if you would actually like to learn what that news is, I'm sorry, I'm not going to tell you on the podcast, because I'm going to call you on the phone. Just send me your number. If you want to get a direct phone call from your boy AP, go to my Facebook page, direct message me your phone number, your email address, and a good time to call. And for about another 3 weeks, I will be doing call time 6 hours a day on the phones, making calls. I've probably called over 2,500 people at this point. For the last 6 weeks, I've just been busting my butt with Jeffrey Carson every day, trying to find out how we can advance liberty, working together in this country. There are some great opportunities coming up, I think, in the short term and in the long term for us to advance the limited government cause. So if you want to hear the news and if you want to talk to me about your ideas for how to advance liberty, I'm actually also asking people's advice and some opinions on the topic that I'm currently pursuing, then do me a favor, send me your phone number. You can actually direct message me on Twitter as well. My Twitter page is is AP for Liberty. That's AP, the number 4, Liberty. You can direct message me there on Twitter, or if you don't use Twitter, you can go to the Facebooks and you can send me a direct message. That's Austin Petersen, facebook.com/producer Petersen, and of course, you know, Petersen's 3 E's, no O's. There's no O's. It's Scandinavian. It's Danish. Come on, guys. Petersen, fb.com/producer Petersen. Direct message me your phone number and your email address, as well as a good time to call, and I will reach out. One qualification, or actually maybe two, is that you should be over 18 years old, because it's really awkward when a 16-year-old or a 15-year-old sends me their phone number and their parent picks up the phone and it's like, why are you calling my child? So please be of age. 18 years old or above would be great. And again, a good time to call so that I don't bug you during dinner or Ramadan or whatever it is that you guys are celebrating. You all have a wonderful week, and I hope to speak to you all personally very soon.